In your 2023 report, you said, quote, there are increasing pressures from communities around the number of international students being recruited in the wake of various housing crises, end quote. Did you raise these alarm bells around housing with the government at that time?
Do you think there is a level of social contract that we did have with those who came here? I have about 30 seconds left. Feel free to unmute or else...
It would be nice to honor our commitments, but if you make stupid commitments, maybe you don't have to keep them.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Welcome to meeting number 4 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration.
Start with Mr. Usher. In 2022, federal public servants warned the Immigration Department about a lack of housing. And there was this article that came out, and what they said to him was, quote, the Deputy Minister, among others, was warned in 2022 that housing construction had not kept up with the pace of population growth, unquote, end quote. In your 2023 report, you said, quote, there are increasing pressures from communities around the number of international students being recruited in the wake of various housing crises, end quote. Did you raise these alarm bells around housing with the government at that time?
Sorry, is that question to me?
Yes, to you, Mr. Usher.
Okay. I don't speak to the government very often. I mean, I don't work for the government of Canada. I've never had a contract with immigration. So, I read a blog. If you call that raising it, I suppose, yes, I did. Oh. But in no other way. Okay,
all right, thanks. Mr. Cote, did you see this housing shortage problem coming in 2022?
I don't know. I can't really recall with any certainty whether I did.
So basically we had a government that got advice. People could see this coming, but yet they chose to do nothing. When in 22-23, when the student population was beginning to explode, did you see any evidence that the government was talking with colleges about concerns over housing capacity?
Is that one for me?
Yes, Mr. Cote, it's for you.
I mean, I didn't. So to directly answer, I did not see any evidence. I feel like honestly, the way this unfolded was, coming out of the pandemic, you had basically 30% growth year over year. I think for two straight years, and there was this moment, I think in later 23, when it was announced that the number of international students had topped 1 million, and I think frankly jaws dropped. I think honestly there was just a bit of a lack of oversight, the growth of the system.
Yeah, okay.
And so I'm not sure if it was straight on the housing issue, but I think that the housing was. Then became an issue as we saw the pressure.
Thank you, Mr. Cote. I think you're right in that jaws dropped, and I think it was quite shocking that the government had no clue what was going on there. I'll go to Ms. Bezo. Your 2023 annual report did not mention anything about housing shortages. Did any of your member institutions raise the housing shortage issue with you?
We were certainly, as we were seeing the growth that Mr. Cote spoke about coming out of the pandemic, substantive growth year over year, we were certainly seeing some pressure start to build in certain communities. And so we saw institutions taking initiative to engage with stakeholders within their communities to look at these issues.
So did you raise this issue with the government in any way?
We were certainly having discussions with government broadly in terms of student flows and the overall direction of the program, broadly in terms of the policy pieces. We were starting to see pressures build in some communities, and we saw that there needed to be, further conversation on these issues. However, we warned very explicitly in our submissions to IRCC in their consultations on the future direction of immigration that caps were not the best way to approach this, that we needed to engage with provinces, with the federal government and our institutions to look at a much more tailored and measured way to address some of the pressures we were starting to see build.
Okay, so interesting. So you did warn the government about this and they chose not to act on it. And of course, eventually they had to, but in those days they didn't. I want to talk about immigration consultants just briefly. There's a special type of immigration consultant known as a Regulated International Student Immigration Advisor, a RISIA, and I think you know about those. Their purpose, of course, is to encourage international students to come to Canada. So, Ms. Bezo, do you agree that immigration consultants are partly responsible for the explosion in international students in Canada?
The role of the Regulated International Student Immigration Advisors isn't to promote Canada. Their role is to provide explicit immigration advice on a broad range of immigration matters related to students. That could be study permit related issues, that could be postgraduate work permit related issues. RICIAs are not involved in the promotion of opportunities in Canada. They are there to support students specifically as it relates to immigration advising within the framework of our Immigration, Refugee and Protection Act.
And practically how that looks at a college is that their job is to try to get as many people into the college as possible. Is that not true?
Actually, they're there to ensure that the institution is meeting its quality assurance commitments and to manage kind of integrity challenges with respect to study permit applications and other immigration related issues. They're really there to support in a very transparent and direct way.
Right, and I guess I just want to point out that you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you do receive about $4,000 for every one of these that gets trained. Is that not correct?
CBIE has a role to play in preparing international student advisors to write the entry to practice to become designated.
Right. So I noticed in your introduction, you spoke glowingly, used the word ethics quite a number of times, but I didn't actually hear you say anything about the youth job crisis that we have in Canada, because it would seem to me that if you lose students from one source, in this case international students, there's 200,000, in the GTA alone, there's about 200,000 unemployed youth. It's approaching 20%. What are you doing to try to attract those youth to your colleges and get them trained up?
A quick response, please.
Yes, our institutions are in their day-to-day work broadly in terms of their education offerings are very much focused on aligning programming to support the evolving labour market needs in Canada and in our communities. We've certainly seen with the latest recalibrations around PGWP a further alignment to ensure that our graduates are in fact job ready. We are hearing from employers about positions that they still struggle to fill absent both domestic and international talent.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bezos, and thank you, Mr. Redekop.
But I was particularly taken when you said that there's a need to get away from corrosive public rhetoric. What do you mean by that?
I think over the course of these last 18 to 20 months, we have seen a considerable amount of scapegoating and blame that is directed towards international students who have chosen to come and study at our institutions. I think we've seen very divisive language that separates those students rather than taking a much more inclusive approach of wanting to welcome them and to speak about ways in which we can integrate them into our communities and into the broader Canadian society. And from our perspective, in a situation where Canada relies both on domestic and global talent to secure our future prosperity, we need to take a more inclusive approach that values the contributions of international students. They are our future builders, planners, engineers, entrepreneurs, just as our Canadian youth, and we need to find a balanced approach to engaging and nurturing their integration.
Thank you, and I know that your expertise is in the area of international students, but can I go one step further and ask you if you would extend that comment about a corrosive narrative that's out there to immigration issues and immigration policy in general?
I think we're seeing a rise in that kind of corrosive rhetoric broadly in a global sense. I just returned from a global summit in London, meeting with my peers. We are seeing these kinds of challenges given the migration trends, given the mounting pressures. I think this is a broad discussion where we need to really focus on where we're going as a country and the message that we want to send to the world in terms of us being welcome and seeing the value of our youth, all of our youth.
My first question is addressed to Mr. Cote. In January 2025, you published a report entitled Where to From Here, focused on the international higher education in Canada. In theme number 2, you explained that the large number of students in general, business, and other low alignment programs struggled to transition to high demand occupations on their postgraduate work permit and often failed to receive permanent residency. If international student caps had been established earlier, would this problem have existed?
It might have existed to some extent, but I think the challenge was you had a huge increase in the number of students, and the largest share of that increase was in college programs, for example, and a huge proportion of those college programs were enrolling students in these kind of general business sort of certificate programs or other types of credentials. And there was just a very low likelihood they would have labor market success after. And so I certainly think it became a numbers game. I think also, part of the challenge on the recruitment side was, this promise was made to many of these students that this will put you on an immigration track in Canada, when the simple fact was there were not enough permanent residency slots to accommodate this huge volume of students we were letting into the country. And so I think many felt as though we kind of sold them it was a bit of a raw deal, right? We kind of led them astray.
Thank you. And as you mentioned, there were a large number of student permits that were issued. Were you or other organizations required to report on the enrollment status and ongoing enrollment and work permit that they are able to gainfully be employed?
So, we were not. We're a center within a university that will have a division that will focus on international education. But a lot of that data would be, and Alex is typically the data expert, but a lot of that would be reported onto IRCC, and a lot of that data was made public, and it was the analysis of that data that started to point to some of those trends like that.
Thank you. And my following question is for Mr. Usher. You published, again, also in 2025, on the state of post-secondary education in Canada. In it, you mentioned that for both universities and colleges, business study are the largest single category of enrollments due to mainly to this being the field of choice for the international students. A few pages later, you write that at the college level, nearly 50% of all students are enrolled in business programs. Besides this statement is a chart where I see in the 2022 and 2023 academic year, there were over 90,000 international students enrolled in college business programs and close to 60,000 university business programs. In your opinion, would these numbers have been the same if the international student caps have been established earlier?
That's a good question. I don't know. Business programs are the cheapest ones for universities to put on, right? So it's not just that. One of the reasons that they require the lowest levels of language skills, frankly, from international students, and they're the cheapest to put on. So there would be a lot. I think even with caps, you would likely see a lot of people in those programs because there's a lot of incentive to build them that way. Would it be as high? Maybe not, but it'd still be high.
So would it be fair to say that these numbers, as far as you know, were uncontrolled and there were no caps, and then they were just free-flowing as the applications come through?
There were no caps because the provincial... So most of that number, those college numbers are in Ontario, okay? And the provincial government on 3 occasions between 2019 and 2024 loosened the regulations so that colleges could accept more and more students. Colleges said, you won't give us the money, let us go get it ourselves. And they did. And, the Ford government in the 905 zone was throwing gasoline on a fire when it came to permitting institutions to bring in as many students as possible, as cheaply as possible. And that meant, in many cases, putting them in business programs.
And in that scenario, were there considerations made to, 1, housing issues, 2, in terms of employment, and as well as the impact to local use in the areas?
25 seconds, please.
You'd have to ask the Ford government, but to my knowledge, no.
So what I gather is, due to these no-cap situations, institutions were allowed to admit as many as they come through without due considerations for housing, for the health care, and other aspects of having these student bodies.
Thank you, Mr. Ma.
Thank you.
You mentioned that that those who have come into Canada already under the social contract, that if one studies, there is a pathway to PR, essentially, are here right now, and that we now have tightened things up, understandably so. We've tightened things up, and they find themselves without that expected avenue to PR. Do you have any solutions or any suggested solutions for us to honor that social contract for those who already are in Canada, have studied under that expectation they enter into PR at some point?
Honestly, I do not have great solutions for you because the challenge is you just have this whole wave of students who came in during that boom, and the rules of the game were changed while they were here. And maybe they were towards the end of their studies, maybe they were already post-studies on a postgraduate work permit. But they'd had some signals about the direction of our immigration system, and that changed pretty abruptly. And we're now operating in a system where there will be fewer spaces available. And so I think it's pretty understandable that they felt like, the rug was pulled a little bit. And I think on the international brand front, these were the types of things that we were seeing in foreign markets, like in India, for example, like people on Reddit message boards literally talking about how Canada pulled the rug out from them.
And
these are the things that will linger.
Certainly. And that's a bit hard to control. Yeah. But do you think there is a level of social contract that we did have with those who came here? I have about 30 seconds left.
I do, yeah. I think these are not just dollar signs in front of us. These are human beings, and also these are people who we're hopeful that will come and can potentially become residents in Canada, or can be Canadian ambassadors for Canada when they go back home. So I think that needs to be part of our.
And just yes, no for the
focus.
Others. Do you also believe there's a social contract? Just a yes, no. Feel free to unmute, or else
it would be nice to honor our commitments, but if you make stupid commitments, maybe you don't have to keep them.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Throughout this testimony, and the witnesses have talked about multi-level responsibility, and I can't help but thinking that after the collapse of the program and the impact it's had across the country, that it's a bit of Monday morning quarterbacking for everybody involved. Because hindsight is sort of 2020, but I'm concerned that colleges and universities over the last this summer have laid off over 10,000 people. Every university in the minister's riding is posting deficits. And while we may have been tightening up on things, Mr. Cote, would you agree that largely these layoffs are fundamentally a result of the sudden shift in the federal program?
I think it's a tough one because the growth was concentrated in certain places. So you've seen major problems at Ontario colleges because Ontario colleges were the ones who so dramatically over-indexed, and you've seen a little bit of that in other parts of the country. I think the other aspect comes back to where Alex was earlier, which was you also have the chronic underfunding of these institutions at the provincial level, constraints on domestic tuitions, and so there's a bit of a gradual ramp up in the challenge, and then this was a bit of a tipping point for certain institutions. And as much as it stinks to close campuses and to lay off staff, I also look at all this and I say we had a system that grew far too big for its britches. You can't continue to employ the same numbers of people if you're not teaching the same number of students. Okay. So I think it was a bit of a reckoning that kind of had to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Cote. I don't have much time here, but
1 minute.
As a result of, I understand and appreciate your comment here, but the impact on post-secondary institutions is across the country. Are you aware of any post-secondary colleges or universities that are on the verge of collapse in the country perhaps over the next couple of years?
Well, Ontario most recently dealt with the Laurentian University situation, which was related to a variety of other things. And they were actually, interestingly, I think, less over-indexed on the international student front. I haven't heard of examples of others that are on the verge of collapse, although I do know from just conversation with some folks in the Ontario government that there are ones that they are looking at and not obviously publicly talking about.
Policy put in place in 2007 a link to permanent residency, and you said colleges, quote, colleges could come along and monetize the policy as a result. Do you include within that the diploma mills, for lack of a better phrase? Would you include those types of colleges in this, those that are not reputable and were a big part of this problem?
So all of those mills, I hate that term. They were teaching public college curricula, every last one of them. So yeah, I know people like to go, like when they see the word private in front of education, they just assume that things are bad. But every single one of them were delivering a public sector education. Some of them are doing it better than others. We don't know because the provincial government declined to actually have any quality assessment processes for these things, which was a disaster. I mean, we could have solved a lot of problems with that. So the answer is, were public colleges, via the use of public-private partnerships, were they monetizing the system? Absolutely. That's 100% what they were doing.
I use that term for lack of a better phrase, or term rather, but the point is taken on narrative.
1 minute.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cote, you talked about the postgraduate worker program and you gave a specific recommendation on what needs to change. And it sounds like you're calling for a decentralized approach such that labor market needs in particular regions are recognized and decisions are made on that basis rather than a 30,000-foot view taken by the federal government. Do I understand your argument correctly?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that type of intervention was probably designed to respond to what Mr. Ma was talking about in terms of this like over-indexation around things like those general business programs. I think the challenge is IRCC in terms of availability of economic data to be linking to where the labor market's headed will probably be challenged in the first place. But also, I think thinking in terms of regional or provincial development, the provinces are probably better equipped to understand what are the types of in-demand fields that they want to be directing to. And so my view would be either do away with that or push it down to the provinces.
Thank you, Mr. Cote. Thank you, Mr. Fragiscatos.
Okay, thank you very much for those comments. That's all for me. Thank you.